Hello, everybody, and welcome to our bonus episode of the We're So Young podcast. Today we have Troy Davidson interviewing me. So,
wow.
Wait, let's do this again. You're doing that.
Welcome everybody to a very special episode of the We're So Young podcast. Instead of your usual host, Diana Garle, you have an unusual host, myself, Troy Davidson, coming in for a very bonus episode of the We're So Young podcast. And I'm very excited to introduce to you a very special person, actor, traveler, globe trekker, indeed one of the best people in the world, and your awesome host of the We're So Young podcast. Give it up for Diana Garle.
I'm so nervous. I'm like,
the tables have turned.
I'm like
topsy-turvy,
obsessively chugging this wine that we're drinking.
Welcome to your podcast.
Oh, thanks.
Yes.
Thanks.
You are a very powerful woman. You have started so many great, wonderful experiments and projects, and you have a beautiful story. And us that have been on the receiving end of these podcast interviews, we've all felt so honored to be on this side, and also we were just so interested in your side as well. So we wanted to hear you and get to know you even more. And thank you for agreeing to do this and allowing me to be on the microphone and be here for it.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I don't know if I consider myself quite that special. I think that's part of the reason why I started the podcast, was because I think that there's so many cool people in my life, and I just want to learn from them and become special through them. It's just great. I'm I don't know. I'm a basic Miami girl, a millennial girl who's going through a quarter life crisis and swears that her life is in shambles, which is actually pretty cool. I don't know.
Well, right on, quarter life. How about you take us back to the start of that quarter? Tell me where you're from. Some of your background.
Cool.
All that stuff.
Yeah. So I grew up in Miami, but I was born in Mexico City. My dad is Mexican and my mom is Colombian, but I grew up with my Colombian side of the family, so I grew up with my mom's side of the family here in Miami. I was super premature. I was born 4.5 months early, so
wow.
Yeah, which is still like 5 months or something. Yeah, it's still, I don't remember. My mom says the weeks all the time. My mom tells me the story and I've started to just block it out. But yeah, I was super super premature. Yeah, I had a feeding tube through my neck, so that's something kind of cool that people tend to notice, and they're like, "What's that from?" Yeah, I used to tell kids when I was in kindergarten that I had vampire bites.
Oh, nice.
Because
before vampires were cool.
Yeah, before Twilight.
Yeah.
And so I had a feeding tube or whatever, and so I was really premature, and then my parents got divorced pretty much very shortly after I was born. I think within the year, and so my mom and I moved here to Miami, and so that's where my grandparents are, and my cousins and all these people. So I grew up here in Miami, and grew up in Hialeah.
Heyo.
Proud Hialeah girl. And then I started acting at a very young age. My mom put me into acting when I was, she put me into modeling. She put me into modeling when I was 4 years old, because I have a habit of not sitting right, especially when I was younger. I used to always sit with my legs really open and just very much I have a comfy dancer's sit stance, and
I love the idea of your mom looking at you sit and being like, "You're going to dance school."
Well, she looked at me and she's like, "You need to learn to sit like a lady." And she put me in etiquette classes that later turned into modeling classes, and then that's just a hop, skip, and a jump for acting classes.
Right.
And we used to go. The studio was called Maxine's, and it was at the Mall of the Americas. And Maxine was the owner of the studio, and it's so funny, like there's very few things from my childhood that I can remember vividly, but I can remember that studio like to the T, like the colors, like everything.
How old were you then?
I was like 4, you know.
Wow.
I started officially acting when I was 5. And I grew up doing that for a while until I was about like 8 years old. My mom kind of took me out and she put me into belly dancing, so I did belly dancing for a long time.
You did belly dancing at 8?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It was because there's this novela that came out called El Clon. And it was like belly dancing was just like part of it, and like it was really big at that time, like to belly dance. So I actually did belly dancing for about 4 years. But she took me out of acting to go into belly dancing for about a year. And I remember being like, well, why am I not acting anymore? My mom was like, well, I don't want to like force you to do, that, because I'd been doing it since I was so young. And I was like, no, I want to do this. So she also put me back into acting classes.
What is it like being an actress that young? Like you're like 5 to 8?
Yeah.
You're like, what is that experience like?
I mean, I just liked the like vibe of it, I think that comes a lot from my mom. My mom is very much a workaholic. My mom actually worked with a production company in Mexico, so that's how she got into the arts and stuff. And my mom's actually a dancer and everything, so she's always been in the arts. But when it came to like TV, and I just like really enjoyed there's so many things happen off camera that people don't know, and it's just like, it's literally a movie, you just sit on set and you just watch all of these moving pieces, and I always was fascinated by it, even when I was younger. So when I actually got back into acting, which was a year later, so maybe, like 8 or 9, my mom put me in this acting school that is no longer around, but I met my mentor, who, rest in peace, is one of like the best people, who was one of the best people on earth, Hector Zabaleta. And he kind of took me under his wing, and he got me into doing Spanish soap operas. But I learned all the techniques that I do now from him, and he ended up teaching me how to edit videos, like use Final Cut Pro at like 9 years old, and like all of these things. And if I would be like, hey, I want to record this for my reel, he'd be like, cool, let's do it, and he's just like was such a phenomenal person. And
that's really smart. He was really setting you up with skills beyond just
like,
how to act.
Yeah, like I learned
to be your own business.
Yeah, I learned how to work a computer. I learned how to work a boom. You know what I mean? Which is like, It's kind of simple now as an adult, but like as a 10-year-old, you're just like, whoa, I'm holding this really heavy equipment that costs a lot of money. And he also got me into writing, and so. Between me and my friend who also went to the school, we kind of grew up together doing this acting stuff. We wrote this like mini series soap opera, and he kind of just edited it a little bit, but it was geared towards kids our age. By this point, I think we're like 13, and he's like, let's do it, let's shoot it. And so it became kind of like a class project, but it was a very serious class project. Like we filmed it, we had like a shooting schedule, we did it on all these fancy cameras, and then he was like, all right, you shot it, you filmed it. It was like a really intense story, because we're like 13, we're preteens, so we're making it real serious, it was called Raíces de Locura.
What does that translate to?
Roots of craziness, or craziness is roots, or something. Yeah.
Sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, it's a soap opera. It's a soap opera, and it's like, it's kids writing
13?
it. Yeah.
Oh man, a 13-year-old Spanish telenovela.
Yeah,
soap opera.
we were at a boarding school, and like one of us would sneak out, and like my character dealt with mental health issues. Whoa. And like, yeah, it was intense. I look back at it now, I'm like, oh my god, it's so bad. But like at the time, I was so proud of it, and so I had to edit it as well, and like we did all of these things. And then he started promoting it, and it kind of just grew from there, and I started doing more soap opera stuff from there, and just kind of like getting into that world through him, and it was intense. It was crazy. And
gosh, when I was 13, I was just like, I wonder if Donkey Kong 2 is gonna come out anytime soon. That'd be fun to play. Like that's it.
I mean, with that, I feel like I've always been told that I act older than my age, and I don't know if that's true all the time, especially now. I'm actively trying to be like, I'm 25, let me be 25. But at that time, I definitely think that, you know, because we were doing all of these things and because we were trying to get represented,
right,
you know, acting, you're such a brand, and I found that out very young, that you're a brand, you know. And
that's a pretty serious thing to
yeah, I mean, at
digest
13,
at
I did
13.
an audition, and basically I was told I was one hamburger away from being a cow
Come on.
at 13. So yeah, so like, I mean, think of that. At 13, you're like, that really messes with your head. And so like, yeah, I had to learn to have a tough skin, or pretend I had a tough skin at a very young age, which I really didn't. I'm a very sensitive person, and like, which is funny that like this is the career I'm in. But yeah, so that was just like really interesting growing up in that, and you know, like there are certain, you know, stereotypes of being a child actor that like I experienced that I know other people didn't, but I definitely think that I just, you know, soap opera life was very different. I had to act like I was so old, you know what I mean? And like I had definitely had like a real crazy stage from like the age of like 13 to like 16. It was like, whew.
You mentioned you felt like you had to be a certain thing. What did you have to be?
In order to continue to get noticed, and just like, you just had to be able to stay up and go to parties and like be around all these older people who are around, you know, substances that like a 13-year-old possibly has in like high school as like a, you know, very quietly, but like it was just always accessible to me. Which, you know, I think back and I'm like, I'm gonna have some serious karma when I have kids. But I think for me, I'm so grateful that I went through kind of like that crazy stage in my life, because I feel like now I'm very calm about things like that. Like, I'm not like going off the handle, or at least when I do, it's very purposeful. Like, not like, you know, so I don't know. Yeah, it was just interesting. And
so you're balancing this with school?
Yeah. But everybody in my school knew that I was an actor. So there was kind of like this unspoken agreement. Like, I would get my assignments sent to me, and as long as I had them done by the deadline and they would stay in a certain GPA, then I can continue, you know. And my mom kind of worked that out with my school, and thankfully I always had really good grades, and I like studying. I think that's a big part of being an actor, is having to study.
Yeah.
So it was nice. Like, my school was really, really supportive of me the entire time, and I've always wanted it, you know. Like, it's funny. I tell people, or I don't tell people all the time, but I just feel like a lot of kids grow up thinking, I can't wait to grow up and have a big house and have a family and get married and all these things, and that's never been me. I mean, of course that would be nice, but like, I think that since I was little, I've always been like, I'm gonna grow up and I'm gonna be an actor. I'm gonna make my living off of acting.
Beautiful.
So yeah, so that kind of, I just wanted it, you know, and I didn't care what I had to do to continue to do that, you know. And even in school, I was in the drama club, and I was going to competitions, and I was at some point became like, you know, my drama club president for 2 years. Nice. And like, you know, and trying to doing stage managing stuff and trying to just kind of get it all in like the art form. And I think for me, it was a big a release, you know. It was just like, that's who I am. Like, I don't know who I am without the arts in my life, you know. Like, I don't know anything if it's not that, you know. So I turned 17, and I decided I didn't want to do soap operas anymore. Like, I was just like, I don't want to do it. I don't like. It started becoming way too political, and it started to really mess with my mental health, because
I mean, this is what, 5 or 6 years in. Wow.
It started to really mess with my mental health. Just, you know, I for the last 5 years, I'd been told I was too fat, and I was too this, and I was too that. And I've never, you know, I've never been overweight. I just don't have the same body structure. And like, I got a nose job, you know, like, there was so many things that I had to do to like fit in. Whereas I was seeing in the English industry, that wasn't necessarily the case. And I realized that I'd been focusing so much of my energy and like what I wanted to give into something that like it wasn't necessarily the art form I wanted to do. There's something about, there's different forms of acting, and soap operas, especially Spanish soap operas, are a very particular aesthetic. And I just didn't want to do that anymore. And so I decided I wanted to focus more on the English industry. And I ended up going to Ireland. And I ended up going to Ireland. I did this summer abroad program with NYU. I actually got in on a full ride. It was a high school summer abroad program. And it was super fun. It was the first time in my life that I was like leaving the country, and I was doing it by myself. Like,
you got your taste there.
Yeah. Oh man, it was so great. And I had such a fun time, and I met people from around the world, and my love for that kind of happened. And that was a big thing for me. Growing up in Hialeah, like everybody that I was around was Hispanic. Like my school was 98% Hispanic, 2% other, whatever that other meant, So I didn't, I didn't know people who weren't Hispanic,
right.
Period. And especially because I did soap operas. So like I was always speaking Spanish. I was always doing all this. And it was so I just got this crazy taste of like a different life. I met people from China. I met people from Brazil. I met like all these people my age.
Brought people from around the world together to Ireland.
Yeah, so
That's even better.
Yeah. Most of us were from the United States, but yeah, there's a couple people, someone from China, this guy from Brazil,
across the United States, like people that aren't just from Hialeah.
Yeah, no, and none of them were on a full ride except for me. Okay. So that was interesting too, because a lot of them, they just grew up very privileged, and so we would be in Dublin. We were based in Dublin. We would be in Dublin, and we'd have a day off, and I'd be like, "Let's go explore, let's go." And they'd be like, "Oh, whatever. We were here last year. Or, like, we're gonna go next year with our parents." And I would just be like, "Who cares? Who cares?" And like, I don't care if you're gonna come tomorrow. Like, let's go explore. Like, we're here. We're 17, We're 17 and we're in Ireland. Mountains. And so I actually, one of the chaperones, his name was Dara. He grew up in like a small town in Ireland, and he just saw that in me, and that like, he's just like, yeah, like she's right, and so he would take me everywhere. So we went and then in that I ended up auditioning for a show up there and ended up staying. And
how long were you up there for?
I was there for a pretty long time.
Wow, enough to get a show. Like,
I was there for a pretty long time.
Awesome.
I mean, enough for me to have to be like, hey, school, I'm gonna be out for a few months. And that was cool because then I lived there by myself. It was just such an amazing and beautiful experience. And it wasn't until I was there that I realized why I loved to do what I loved to do. Basically, this lady, she starts doing this table read, and she like blows me out of the park in a table read. And like, she just did so well, and I just couldn't stop thinking about that performance for days.
Wow.
And I was like, that's it. I want to impact one person the way that this person just impacted me. And it just kind of opened my eyes to what it was that I really, what is it that I'm trying to do, because especially growing up being a child actor, a teen actor, or whatever, like, you're like, I want to be famous, and I want to, and that wasn't in the Instagram time. I can't imagine growing up doing it now, but it was like, it was in the MySpace, Facebook time, which was, still like very destructive for me, at least. Like, it really messed with me. Like my mental health, it was just like really, so that trip living in Dublin was just such a eye-opening experience that made me completely shift my life.
Wow.
It
really brought like a new perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, I need to focus on this for me. I need to focus on this because of what it can, because it can like change someone's life, as opposed to like because I want to be famous.
It sounds like you found the passion there.
Yeah,
like growing up, it was something that your mom got you into, and now you're just kind of perpetualizing. You love everything that has to go with it, but it sounds like
I didn't know why.
it found you.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. And you're still what, 17?
I was 17, yeah, I was 17.
I didn't have that until I was like in my mid-20s. So I was your age now.
So I ended up coming back, and I finished high school, and I did my like thespian thing or whatever, and I was like head of the thespian society or whatever. It was like so great. I graduated high school, and it was time for me to go to college. I applied everywhere. I applied NYU. So NYU was my top choice. Especially because I'd done the summer abroad program, and I was like, oh, and all my friends from the abroad program were gonna go to NYU, and it was just like, oh, it's gonna be a reunion. We all love each other, and I got in, but I didn't get in with a scholarship, and
so out of state,
and like living in New York, and at the time financially, for a while my mom had been struggling and my family had been struggling, so I just couldn't go. Because I was just like, I can't do this to my family financially, and I need to be smart about it. Like, this isn't the kind of career that like you go to college and you're gonna become a millionaire. You know what I mean? This is quite the opposite. So I decided not to go to NYU, but I decided very late. Like, I originally was like, I'm going. I had like a bunch of stuff, and then like very last minute, I was like, I can't do this. My mom had gone into the hospital, and I was like, I can't be away from my mom. I can't do this. So I decided not to go. But now I had to go to community college, which was like, you know, it's like kind of embarrassing. Like, I was just like, there's like this stigma on it, which is so dumb. It's so dumb.
It's in our heads, and it's in everyone's heads.
It's so dumb though, because the smartest thing you could do is go to community college for the first 2 years and save money and then go, right? Yeah, but like, especially, you know, at 17, it's like, oh, you're going to this or
There's so
whatever.
much judgment.
There's so much
that
judgment
you put on yourself, and that you feel others put on you, and others do put on you.
And for me, it was a huge ego thing. Like, I got into all the other schools that I wanted to get into for theater, you know, and like
NYU.
Got into NYU. I applied for FSU. I got into Marymount. I didn't really apply too many places because I really wanted NYU.
Right.
But yeah, like, so it was just like, it was like an ego thing.
Sure.
And so I was like, fine, I'm gonna do Miami-Dade College, and like, MDC's great. MDC's great, but 17-year-old me was like not happy with it. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to apply to New Worlds at the time because I was also like, I want to be able to work professionally.
Right. They
you know, like, I was
there.
like, if I'm staying in Miami, I want to be able to just work, you know, like,
for
exactly
8 years now.
Exactly. Like, I've been working.
It's your identity.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'd been like doing commercials since I was 5, you know, like, it's like, I want to be able to have that freedom, and, you know, going to MDC would give me that freedom, or I just wouldn't care enough, you know. So I signed up for classes, but I also started auditioning for professional theater companies down here, and like, nobody knows me at this point, you know. I graduated. I was still 17 when I graduated, and like, nobody knows who I am, and here I am going into all these professional theater company auditions, which is so funny because I look back at it now and I'm like, I know all these people who I auditioned for, and some of them were kind of mean to me, just saying, you know. But you know, I was a kid. Like, I'm sure like all of them were like, what is this 17-year-old doing here? You know, can't even hire you. But I went into this one particular audition, and I got the callback, and I got really excited, and I was like, oh, I got a callback. And by that point, I'd already started going to school at MDC, and I was having a miserable time. I hated it. It so much. And again, it's very much ego. Like, it was all ego.
Yeah.
But I just was so upset to be there.
Right?
Yeah.
That ego gets you.
Oh man, and I'm an only child who was always told I was wonderful, you know, like, and definitely from the years of like 17 to like 25, it's hit me hard. It's like, no, you're not. I mean, maybe you are, but no, you're not, you know. And so it was just like, sit yourself down. Yeah.
That happens.
Like, yeah. And so it's like, sit down.
When you get older, yeah.
And I'm going to this school, and I'm having a miserable time, but I still don't want to do poorly, but I go to this callback, and it's terrifying because the callback was a couple months after the audition. So the audition was like in June, and the callback was like in September. They were like, do what you did at the audition. So I was like, perfect.
Right on.
That's great. So originally the audition called for two monologues and contrasting, and a joke and a song, right? But at my audition, all I did was one monologue. I did a dramatic monologue, and I did a song.
Okay.
So when they said, do what you did at the audition, all I prepared was that same monologue. And, like, I'd never done these, like, theater auditions before, so I didn't know.
Right.
So I get there, and I'm like, it's Stephanie Anson. It's the people in the room are Stephanie Anson, who at the time ran Playground Theater, but became Miami Theater Center. Fernando Calzadilla and Steven Kaiser was there, and he was our assistant directing the show. And, little old me goes up, and I do my monologue, and I'm like, yeah, I nailed it, and I was like,
Boom,
I felt really
swish,
good. Yeah.
Moving on.
Yeah, and then Stephanie's like, okay, do you have another monologue? And I was like, and all the blood drained from my face because I had other monologues, like I did drama growing up.
Yeah.
And
you didn't prepare for it.
But I didn't prepare, and I freaked out, and I was like, no, I don't. And she's like, okay, do you have a joke? And I was like, yeah, I know lots of jokes, but I cannot think of a joke to save my life. So I'm like,
you said yes?
Yeah, and I was like, I'm gonna make it up. And so I'm like, why did this is so funny? It's like, it's not funny. It's like the worst. But I was like, why did the bunny cross the road? And they're like, well, why did the bunny cross the road? And I was like, to lay Easter eggs. Duh. Like, that was my response. And
did you add the duh?
I did.
Perfect.
I said, to lay Easter eggs. Duh.
Perfect.
And Steven, who was there, he just, like, cracked up.
Yeah.
He cracked up. And I genuinely believe that if it wasn't because he started laughing, like, I wouldn't have gotten the job. But I was like, thank God this, like, tall guy is, like, laughing at me. Like, oh, thank goodness. And so, and then she's like, okay, now do your same dramatic monologue again. She's like, do your same dramatic monologue again, but, like, be a monkey and, like, run around the room,
Now you have a comedic monologue.
Yeah, and so I'm doing that, and she makes me, like, run, and she's like, okay, stop, that's good. Now sing your song. And I was like,
wow.
I can't even breathe, and I'm doing a song. And I'm like, that's it, it's over. Like, they're just, like, making fun of me now, like, that's not, like, little 17-year-old me is like, and, and they told me right then and there, they're like, we want to cast you as our understudy. Cool. And, I remember being like, oh, like right now, you're telling me right now? Okay, great. And then they, they tell me how much the pay is, and it's more than I've ever made in 1 week, and it's, like, a long contract. Like, our contracts at MTC used to be, like, 10 weeks, it's long. And I was like, oh, I'm doing this. And then they told me the commitment of it, which was Tuesday through Sunday, is a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah, you're earning that money.
Yeah, you're earning that money. But, like, of course, that's what I wanted to do. Like, I was so excited. And so I was like, oh, I'm in classes. Okay. I went on my phone and I dropped all my classes, all my college classes. Wow. And I was like, okay. And I didn't even...
What was that moment like? Was it very quick or like...
It was quick. I didn't even think about it. I'm very impulsive. Okay. And my impulses have gotten me very far, but also... taking me back too.
Sure. Impulse can do that.
I'm very impulsive. I didn't even think about it. I just wanted it so badly. I was like, this is great. And I did it. And then I remember being like, ooh, I'm going to tell my mom now. And like coming up with this whole PowerPoint of all these actors who've been successful without... Oh, man,
you went hard on Wikipedia.
Yeah, I did. But you know what? Like my mom, man, she's always just been so supportive of whatever it is that I want to do. And, like, I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky because I told her, and, like, I could see the, like, worry in her face, but I didn't even have to get through. I didn't even have to do the PowerPoint. Like, she was just like, do you think this is going to help you in your career? And I 100% believed it. And I believed in myself, and I believed in just being like, just let me have this chance. And she was like, okay. A big part of her knew that I was going to do it regardless, but, like, it was just so nice to just have that blessing, And, and then I met you, and I met all these
Damn.
people, and I started working at this theater company, and then slowly went from becoming an understudy to becoming a character in every show, and we worked there for 4 years. Right? Yeah, I did like 4
Yeah.
years there, and I was like a resident actor. So were you. Both of
Yeah.
us did every show, and it was just
You were
lovely.
very impressive.
Thank you.
like at first, like we didn't know you. It was fun and having you around, and definitely getting into the style of which we were putting on shows there, which was like pretty cool and intense training for about 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then into your kind of standard blocking.
I mean, it was my college
or acting.
experience.
Right. There was a lot of education that happened there. And a lot of group dynamics that happened there,
Yeah.
which were pretty wonderful. But I remember distinctly that first show you did as the understudy. You had to go on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our main actress, she fell ill and couldn't make that show. Like only like an hour or two before curtain, and like it was not an easy role. This was a demanding, you're on wires, you're dancing, you're all over the place, you do not have a second, like you are the entire show.
Yeah, actually, funny story. I remember getting that call. It's our stage manager. She's like, this person just got really sick. You need to go on. Can you do it? And I was like, yeah, no, I could do it. I'm ready. And she's like, okay, come now because you need to practice being in a harness because you haven't done that before. And I was like, oh, that's right. I have to climb. Okay, yeah. Okay, I'm on my way. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hang up and literally run towards a trash can and puke. And I just puke for like a good 5 minutes. Like, I'm like, okay. And I'm like, Mom, I'm going on. And I remember like...
Oh, the body is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, it just like... I remember the song. And so like... you know the song Ladies Night? Oh,
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
Ladies
The
Night.
new version or the old version?
No, the old version.
Oh, okay.
And that song was playing on my drive, and I made it from Hialeah to Miami Shores in the length of that song.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been the radio who made it longer, but like, that's the only song I can like. And so like every time I need a pump up, I put that song on now because I'm just like, yeah.
I remember after that show, we all applauded you and cheered you, and I was just like, damn, like
Thanks.
that is hardcore. Hats off to you. So well done. Yeah. All the running around and monkeying and getting rid of your nerves as they were doing totally paid off because it got you in there. And
I love that role. We remounted it, and then I played the character again.
Yeah, you got this lovely, a company that really gave you an education in a lot of different ways, and kind of set you up for venturing outside of the theater as well. Afterwards, you started working around Florida doing different shows, and then also at the theater, not children, the
Children's Museum.
Yeah. What's it like over there?
I love it because I'm working with some of my best friends, and we get to create, we create different shows and little skits and stuff based off of our exhibits, and I get to dance. I'm dance captain, which I never thought I'd be able to say. And like so we do like different dance party. It's just having fun all the time. Working at a children's museum is so nice. And
that's an awesome way to describe a job. Having fun all the time.
Yeah.
That's dope.
And like it's exhausting to have fun all the time,
Sure.
It's funny because we talk about it all the time. It's like, yeah, we get to have fun. Like we get to party and we get to dance, but we have to be on, you know? Like we leave our like office, like our education office where we all hang out. We leave that office and it's like we are on and we are present and we have to make these kids laugh and be happy.
And feel empowered.
Yeah. And it's great because we get to exercise the whole, like, creative mind. Like, my survival job is me doing exactly what I love, you know? And I feel so lucky. I do that and I teach also, but I teach theater. So, like, it's just, I'm very lucky in the sense that, like, every single thing I do revolves around the thing that I'm so passionate about because I think we talked about it in your episode, like there's such a hustle to it, Right. To just be able to stay afloat that like, man, I don't know if I'd be able to do it I work 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And I work crazy hours and stuff. And if it wasn't because I love what I do, like, I don't know if I could do it.
Oh,
So.
would you mind stepping through, if you don't, that's okay, a thing at the museum that transpired between you and a plastic goat by chance, and kind of your strength and recovery from there?
Yeah.
If that's okay.
Yeah, it's so great. Yeah. So I was doing a little performance at the Children's Museum for their summer camp. We're going into a blackout, so it's really dark. I trip and I smash my teeth directly into one of our props that we use all the time. His name is Pablo. He is a life-sized plastic goat. And I smashed my teeth directly into his face. To which I'm never going to forget that feeling of, like, falling and being like, oh, and people being like, are you okay? And I'm like, feeling like porcelain pieces in my mouth and just spitting it out and being like, I think I broke my teeth. And running in pure darkness, like being like savagely running and trying to go through backstage where there's like a lot of stuff happening. And running to the bathroom and seeing myself in the mirror. And, like, for people who don't know me or know what I look like, I have dimples. Yeah. I've grown up, that's been, like, the one thing. Like, growing up feeling very insecure about myself and my body and my weight and everything. Like, my dimples have always been, like, my saving grace. Well, like, oh, okay, at least my smile's okay, And then the one thing that I felt very secure, I've always felt very secure about, being taken away from me, like stripped from me, because now my teeth are like busted.
What did you see when you looked in the mirror?
Well, I broke my 4 front teeth, and one was hanging by like a nerve. And yeah, I just like, honestly, I can't really describe what I saw. My first thought was, I'm never gonna act again. And I actually went into, like, a shock. Like, I didn't cry. I was just, like, I was on my way to I had to go to an audition after that. So I remember being like, I can't go to the audition. I'm never gonna, and I just had, like, a meltdown. I had a meltdown, and I just, like, started sobbing. And I was just, like, financially, I was also, like, how am I gonna pay for this? And Brie was, like, right away, she's like, you're not gonna pay for this. This happened at work. Like, this is not your fault. Like, you're fine. Mm-hmm. The problem was that it had happened at Friday at, like, 4 o'clock. Like, by the time we got the go by, like, HR that was going to deal with the workers' comp, we weren't getting to the hospital till, like, 5 o'clock on a Friday. Dentists don't work over the weekend. Oh, yeah, right. And they don't normally work Mondays either. Fun fact.
Really?
Yeah. And by 5 o'clock, they're closed. So we go to Mount Sinai. And they're like, well, yeah, you need a dentist. We can't really do anything. Here's a Valium.
Right.
And deal with it over the weekend.
Here's a drug.
Yeah. And I was like, they gave me one. And I literally was like, one? I have to deal with this for the whole weekend for one? And, yeah, it was crazy. Like, I can't even tell you. It was just like, I remember getting the bill for that, the, like, hospital bill for that, and being like, you put a popsicle in my mouth. Why is this $4,000? Thankfully, the museum was really cool about it. But, yeah, and so, like, actually the CEO called me a couple of days later, and she was like, she'd found out about it, and she was like, you're going to my dentist.
Cool.
And I was like, oh, okay. And I go to that dentist, and I'm proudly going to say his name is Dr. Alan Kaplan, and he is the best dentist in South Florida. So if you are in South Florida, go to Dr. Alan Kaplan, because he loves what he does and he's amazing. And he just, like, took me under his wing. He was like, I show up after 3 days of dealing with, like, a nerve that was, like, out of my mouth and, like, having to not being able to chew, and just emotionally, like, I was just like, I was, like, in a really dark place. And I walk into this dentist's office, and he was just like, you're not gonna walk out like that. Like, I'm not gonna let you walk out with no teeth. Like, he just dealt with me and dealt with workers' comp, which is a pain. It's so hard to get work, like, to, like, deal with them. And it was a whole year's process. It took 12 months. I had about 12 different surgeries for in my mouth. I had to get my teeth extracted and get implants, and it was just, like, such a taxing emotional time for me.
Well, okay, is there anything you could tell me or tell us about kind of the emotional side of something like that happening?
Yeah,
And
you know,
coming out of it?
yeah, I mean, it's so funny because it's just like, it's your teeth, like, you're fine. But, like, it, you know, for me, like I said, it was just the one thing in my life that I felt very comfortable about was taken away.
Your smile.
My smile. And it sounds so vain, but it's just like, it was so much for me, and it just made me, and like, I couldn't.
No, I mean, it was what you identified with, you know, it's
Yeah.
how you defined yourself, you know, in that degree, and that was taken out of from
Yeah,
from what you thought.
And I couldn't do film stuff during it because,
Right.
Even though Dr. Kaplan and all the doctors who worked with me, you know, they had stuff in my mouth, so I never, like, aside from those 4 days where I had like a hole in my mouth, you know, you wouldn't be like, you wouldn't, if unless you look closely, you wouldn't tell, but on film you can tell anything, you know, like you look at someone through film and like you can see all these things. So I couldn't audition. I went into an audition and like I thought someone couldn't notice it, and the casting director was like, "What are you doing in my office like that? Like with your teeth like that? Get out."
Wow.
And that was really hard. Like, that was one of the first times in my adult life that I dealt with that. With, like, you know, like the equivalent of you're one hamburger away from being a cow, you know. It's just like, what do you do, you know? So like, I went into like a really, really dark place because it was just like a big part of me. I saw no end to it. Like, I kept on getting surgeries in my mouth and like reconstructive things, and like nothing ever was done. And I was just like, and I was like, I'm never going to be able to act properly again. I couldn't eat. I didn't eat anything solid for like 6 months. People that had to deal with me, like, man, thank you if you're listening, thank you for dealing with me, because
But the way you carried yourself during that time, like, it was, whether it was you pushing through it or whatever, but like, you were you know, I still felt you regardless of whatever was going on. Like, your joy and your passion and all that didn't seem hit.
Well, I appreciate that. I definitely didn't feel that way. I think I'm pretty good at hiding when I'm like crumbling, but I mean, definitely at home, I know someone suffered dealing with me and like because I would, you know, it's hard. Like, I can only have so much mashed potatoes and ground turkey. Actually,
Applesauce.
You know, actually, there's a story. So during the weekend that I broke them, I was not okay, and someone was like, I'm gonna make you food, and he was like, I made nachos, and I look at him and I was like, do you not understand that I can't bite down? And I lose it. And like, he really was trying, and I just was like, I can't do that. And I started sobbing, and I made him feel so bad. I'm so sorry. And then my friend Noah, who happened to be there the next day, shows up with like a huge thing of mashed potatoes and ground turkey, and he's like, here's something for you to eat. And it was just like, it was so sweet, you know, everybody was so nice to me. It was so, you know, but it's just like, you don't even, maybe this is like my only child syndrome. Like, you don't even notice that. You're just like, this sucks, you know? Right. But yeah, it was rough.
And it does suck. Let's be valid about that.
It was horrible. It was horrible. And like, the problem is because I was dealing with workers' comp. Things wouldn't get approved very fast. So honestly, like, I could have had all of my procedures done and been done with everything in like 4 months, but it took a year.
The process took.
Because the workers' comp had to approve. So essentially, I would get a surgery. That surgery needed to heal before they could do the next surgery, but it could have all been done in one sitting, essentially. Right. So I remember the day that I had like my teeth that I have now. I like sobbed. I'm getting kind of emotional because it was just like, it was such a long year of like being like, I don't think that I'm gonna, you know, like, just something as simple as like, I can't bite into a sandwich, you know what I mean? Like, people take that for granted. Biting into a sandwich is one of the best things ever.
I can concur.
I'm still too scared to like bite into an apple. Like I have to
Right.
slice my apples and stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was just, you know, it yeah, it was intense.
So some things that you found that you took for granted that you don't necessarily see, or even the idea of like you kind of being stripped from this piece of your identity and now having to go a year kind of without it, but also just physically being able to learn how to do something different or how to live differently. What kind of helped you out during that time, or what kind of brought you out when you were feeling super down?
I had a really good support system at the time. And everybody who was in my life at the time was just dealt with me. And sometimes it's just like, sometimes you just need someone to deal with your BS, you know? And that kind of helped me a lot, you know, like being like, it's okay. And like, I had a lot of reassurance and, you know, but also, I got into yoga.
Really?
I fell in love with it. It was a way for me to get back into like a good mental state. So I actually loved it so much I started doing a teacher training, and to like teach yoga. I love it. But yeah, that was one thing that really helped me, because I wanted to do something for me at the time, you know, and as much as acting is for me, it's also for me to live, you know, and I wanted to do something very opposite of that, and being able to meditate and stuff like that. So yoga was that for me. Yoga was what kind of helped me get back into being okay with myself, and then finding something that I loved, you know, like I was like, I love this.
It's beautiful.
It was amazing, and
it's so important to have time to meditate and to just kind of, and it comes in different forms.
Yeah.
Some people like to sit down and meditate. Some people like to do yoga, whatever it may be.
I didn't think I would love it as much as I did, but I just really, there was something so beautiful about it all, that like the philosophy of it and just the idea of what yoga is. I just like, I fell in love with it all. I value the moments that I can be very 100% present, and I think that as an actor, you're more aware of them, you know? But I can count with my two hands in the last 5 years the moments that I've been like, I'm so here and I'm so present, you know? And it's so lovely, you know? And so like that was it for me, you know? And being like, just kind of focusing my energy into something positive, you know? And like, it was my therapy. It was my you know, my mental health cleansing was doing yoga during the time of my teeth and stuff. So beautiful.
Beautiful. Well, I'm gonna do a hard transition so we can get going. I would love to hear some of your maybe stories, or just things that you've gained from traveling the world. You've had a unique experience of being someone who could literally who has gone to many countries, and I just want to tap into some of what that feels like. I
could talk about this all day.
Yeah.
We don't have time. This is supposed to be a bonus episode.
Well,
It's not supposed to be that long.
This could be the majority of it. You can edit it, make it wherever you need.
Yeah, so I mentioned this, I think, in, I don't know if it's your episode. I mentioned it somewhere, but Vanessa's, yeah. So I did a world tour recently. Well, I lived in Ireland when I was younger, and then I got a world tour, and I visited 14 countries in 27 cities in 4 months, which is
stellar.
Ridiculous. It's
ridiculous is the right word. Yeah, that's the word.
Ridiculous. It's just like
in the best way possible.
It's so good. God, and I fell in love in like the purest and most real way, and not to one specific thing. Like I fell in love with people, and I fell in love with cultures, and I fell in love with myself. I learned so much about myself in that. There's something so beautiful about being somewhere where there's so many people who are the same but so different, you know? And it made me love to travel, and like,
you saw a lot of differences but also similarities in people, cultures, lifestyles.
And I just learned so much about myself in travel, and what I wanted and what I didn't want, and like what my goals were. I learned how to be independent, because at the time while I was when I went on tour. It'd been a long time since I'd been independent, and so I learned a lot about myself and who I am as a person, and I think that happens at any age when you're traveling, because you have to, I went. So the tour started in San Diego, but we did all of Central America. We did some South America. We did some of the Caribbean. We did Cuba. And then we went over to, we did Bermuda. And then we'd cross the Atlantic and went to Europe.
On a boat.
On a ship. It was amazing. It was on a ship, and it was great. And I met so many people. So on the ship, there was 47 different nationalities.
Just on the ship itself.
Yeah. So living with people with so many different cultures was amazing.
In close quarters.
In close quarters, yeah. You can't leave, You're, especially crossing the Atlantic. There was 5 days we were crossing, and there was a tropical storm, so we couldn't even go outside and be on deck.
You were in a tropical storm?
Yeah, there was a tropical storm. We were leaving Bermuda during a tropical storm on Friday the 13th. I was like, but you know what? The day I spent 2 days in Bermuda, but the day that I went, the day I got off the ship and was in Bermuda was one of the days that I felt the most present in my life. People, especially people that were there with me, they're like, why are you so happy? Why did you like Bermuda so much? And I was like, bro, I don't know. I was here. I was so present. It was so beautiful. And I just what I loved about traveling was that it gave me the chance to be present at all times. I was just so aware of how fortunate I was, and how often does that how often do you, we're fortunate all the time, we get opportunities all the time, and how often do we take those things for granted, and how often do we really get to acknowledge how lucky we are to be just breathing right now, and I felt that constantly on that trip. I just felt so present, and that was so valuable for me, because I'd realized that I hadn't been feeling present in a very long time.
Okay.
And that was, there was times more than others, obviously, on the trip, because it was 4 months and it was a long time, but there was a lot of, there was this one day I was in Havana, and it was beautiful. It was just a day that it was me and a friend, and we just kind of went. We had croquetas, and we got really drunk, and we went up to a rooftop, and we just sat at a rooftop, and it was just we just watched the sunset in front of all of Havana, and I was like,
goodness.
What? This is my who does this? And it was so beautiful. And the same with Bermuda, and in Portugal, I sprained my ankle in Portugal, and I didn't care. I was I'm so
present I am.
Yeah, I was just I'm gonna still party. I'm gonna go do these things. It was just yeah, it just made me feel very present, and it made me fall in love with traveling, and it made me fall in love with being okay with who I am, and who just finding myself as an adult, because I feel I'd been on such a routine my entire life, Yeah. Working, trying to live.
You've been nonstop since you were 5.
Yeah, and it was just it gave me time to breathe. It gave me time to watch all of Game of Thrones, that I had, you know what I mean? I'd never seen Game of Thrones. Yeah, all of these things. And also just connect with people from all over the world, and connect with people that it just new people, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful. And honestly, a lot of things of my whole life changed because of that trip, and some really good things happened and some really bad things happened. But if you were to ask me right now if I would go back and do it knowing all the bad things that happened, I would still do it. There's 100% no doubt in my mind that I would go through that experience all over again. Even if it means all the things, all the transitions,
right,
and all the life changes, because it led me here. I'm doing a podcast now because of all of the things that none of this would be possible if it weren't because of that trip. And that trip was so big. That trip was so monumental for me.
It sounds like it was big in breadth Like, you went to how many, or where'd you go?
14. Okay. So, let's see if I can do it off of memory. Mexico, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Colombia, Cuba, Haiti, Bermuda, Portugal, Spain, Italy, France, Monaco, Malta. I'm missing one.
And Madagascar.
No, I don't remember. But yeah, there's one more in there that I'm going to be like, oh, is that one? Yeah. But yeah, I mean.
It was
Did
big
I say
in breath,
Italy?
but
Yeah.
maybe.
I don't know.
But
Doesn't
also,
matter.
it was really big just for yourself.
Yeah.
Not just the places you went, but the places you went internally. It
Yeah.
sounds like
Yeah.
you traveled.
I traveled,
in a whole different way. But,
also, there's something so crazy about being like, today I'm speaking in Spanish, tomorrow I'm speaking in Italian. Like,
amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy. It was. I mean, I can talk about that trip for hours. Like, there's not enough time, and all the people that I met and all the experiences that happened, and I regret zero part of that, like, I'm sad. I'm not.
That was only last year.
I know. Can you believe that? I can't even, that seems like a whole world away. My whole life has changed so much from the moment I found out that I was going on that tour to now. Like, I can't begin to comprehend if I were speaking to someone, you haven't asked me, but that was a big part of this podcast, was just dealing with a transition, and I am not the same person I was then, and going through all of that transition, going through all of those changes, man, I can't imagine, I could imagine who I would be if I hadn't gone through all those transitions, and I don't know if I like that person. I've gone through a lot of stuff, and my things have been hard in the last year, and things have been great in the last year, and things have been interesting and confusing and beautiful and eye-opening, and I appreciate every part of it, even the bad parts.
And that's what brings me to asking, very quickly about this, We're So Young podcast. This experience that you had, and now transitioning into where you are now. You said that it pretty much helped inform why we're doing this. Could you maybe reiterate what you're trying, or what was your purpose in starting this podcast, or what you want to find in this?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah,
It doesn't be concrete.
Yeah, I know. It's funny because it's I knew you were going to interview me, and I was like, that's obviously a question. And it's just I was like, okay, I'm going to, and I've thought about it, and I don't know if there's a real concrete answer, but I'd always wanted to do podcasts. I really like the art form of radio and audio. And I think I touch on that in a couple episodes, but I didn't know what I wanted the podcast to be about. And I just knew I'd been wanting to do it. I'd been wanting to do it for a couple years. And then I went through this huge life change. My entire life changed in, I really saw my life at one point going one way. And it was very concrete. And then I did this tour. And then my life changed. And all of a sudden, all the things that I thought were going to happen weren't happening anymore. And not because I didn't want them to, but just because that's just the way that life works. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you think that things are going to go, and it's surprise, it's not. And I think I started this podcast to be able to remind myself that everything is all right. That everybody goes through these things. Everybody goes through these hard challenges and transitions, and I just want to learn from everybody who goes on my, who comes on the show, and learn about how they deal with it, because I'm still trying to deal with it, and I'm still trying to be okay with everything that's changed, and to some really deep down rooted level, I know I'm very okay, things have been really rough, and it's like a reassurance that like we're so young, like we're so young, but there's so much time. For a while, the podcast was going to be called There's Still Time instead of We're So Young. But I ended up I ended up doing a short, like a play reading, which is basically like when actors read different things for an audience when things are in development for a show. I was reading short stories by Marina Keegan's, her book, The Opposite of Loneliness. And it's wonderful. I actually link it on the website. It's the reason that the podcast ended up happening. I was in a really dark place. I was mentally just like in the worst place I think I've ever been in my entire life. There was like 6 months where just like everything, and I can't describe it in a different, like it was empty. It was black and empty, and I just didn't know. And I got cast to do this play reading, and it was this director that wants to make this short story book into like a play, and the book is called The Opposite of Loneliness with Marina Keegan. I said that already, but I was reading the title short story, and this was like something that she actually wrote for her class in Yale the day before her graduation. And she reads it, and she basically talks about how like it's absurd to think that like we're too late to try new things, and we're too late to like experience new things, and that like transition should like put a hold on us, you know, like we're so young. And she says it so many times in that short story. She's like, we're so young, we're so young, we're so young. And I remember reading that for the first time, and it was during the time that I was going through this really emotional part of my life, but I had gone into like survival mode, and wasn't crying, like was just like, I'm just trying to live, I'm just trying to and I read that piece, and I just started sobbing, like uncontrollably sobbing. Like it just kind of like opened this part in me that like I was trying so hard to just like suppress, because I needed to move out, I needed to live, I needed to figure out how my life was going to be. And I had just tried to suppress it, and all of a sudden, here I was, reading this thing, and just, like, being like, yeah, like, I'm gonna be okay.
Yeah.
And that was, like, it just is one of those things that just came, like, right when it needed to come, you know? I'm getting kind of emotional talking about it, because it was just, like, and it just, like, I was like, that's what I want the podcast to be about, because I know, you know, everyone goes through different kinds of transitions, you know, and I love that about the podcast, that it's like everyone's transitions are so different, but the idea that like everybody goes through hard times, and everybody has a story, and every story is valid, and the way that everybody deals with it is valid. And I think that that's huge, because I think that we get really upset with how we deal with things ourselves, you know, like it's just like I know I do, like I'm just like, oh, I'm going through stuff, I'm gonna just go full throttle into work, you know, and I beat myself up for it, and it's just like, no, like that's okay, you know, whatever it is that you need to do to be okay, do it because you want to be okay, not because you feel like you're trying to do it for somebody else. Like do it because of you. And so I basically selfishly started the podcast for me. You know, I started it so that people can hear, you know, other people's stories, but really so that I can talk to these people and just kind of like therapy, you know. It was, so I
genius.
Long story short, I started the podcast for myself. You know, I just like I it's so humbling to know that people are listening, you know, and it like, it's amazing that people are listening, and I'm so happy that people are listening, but like, like I just want to be okay, and I want everybody who listens to be okay, and and it's the idea of knowing that like, sometimes things are not okay, but it doesn't matter how old you are, you're like, we're young as long as we say we're young, and a transition's gonna happen whether we want it to or not, and we embrace it, you know. And so that's long answer.
It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing this platform to us in the world.
Yeah.
Beautiful stuff.
Thanks.
So, what is something that you would like to tell yourself? Let's say age 13. Age 13. What would you like to tell 13-year-old Diana?
Oh, I do that every episode, don't I?
You know, I'll give you grace. Maybe 12 to 14. Somewhere in there.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, it's something that I'm trying to practice now, but I wish I would have started when I was younger. Mm-hmm. So I think it would be, don't apologize for what you feel. I think that's huge. I think that I've always been very apologetic and very someone who cares very much about how other people perceive her. And it's not until this whole life transition that I've realized, it's okay to feel this. It's okay to, feel this and be open about it. And, yeah, just don't be apologetic for what you feel. If that's what you feel, then that's what you feel, and that's valid. And if someone wants to help you through it, then they want to help you through it. And if they don't want to help you through it, then cool. Bye.
Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't mean that either people are bad people. It just means that, it just, you need to deal with it in a way that you need to deal with it,
Validating your own emotions is empowering, and also, suppressing that, can get really resentful or make it real hard.
Right.
So, yeah, being true and being valid, to what you're feeling is not a negative thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
So, that, I guess.
Okay. We're getting there. We're doing it.
Yeah, I'm trying to see. I'm like, well, how much can I edit out of this episode?
You're in control, so.
Uh-oh. It's going to be like a 5-minute, hey, thanks for coming.
This has been great. I was in Telenovelas. Bye.
Yeah.
What is something new that you've started beyond the We're So Young podcast?
It's... God, crap. I knew all these questions are coming, and then as they happen, I'm like, oh, what is it? It's like the joke, It's like, what's something new that I've started? I started trying to learn the ukulele.
Yeah.
I'm not very good. It's really hard. I knew it was gonna be hard, but it's really hard. But yeah, I started trying to learn to do the ukulele, and I heard the song Love Lies, and I was like, that song would sound so good in the ukulele. Yes. So I just bought a ukulele so I could play that song.
That's the right way to do it.
Yeah, and so I've started, and it's really hard, but I've got the chords, and I've got the strumming. Great. And I know the song, but I can't put it all together yet.
Okay,
so it's happening.
Yeah. Keep circling it.
Yeah, so that's something new I've done recently.
Wonderful. Music is great.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And I also just, I get really passionate about new things, so, I love it. I'm just whenever I have free time, I'm like, where's my ukulele? Let's do it, and I love having that, new feeling about something, so that's great.
Beautiful. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. And now, what is one thing new that you would like to do going forward?
So my New Year's resolution, I told you, but my New Year's resolution was to go to 5 different cities, but now I know I'm going to do that.
Ka-ching, dung.
Yeah.
But I meant to make the sound of basketball. It wasn't ka-ching.
Okay, well, I'll edit that in.
That.
So originally I wanted to go to 5 different cities, but I am going to 5 different cities. I'm going to Denver, I'm going to Morocco, I'm going to Madrid, and I'm going to, Morocco's a country, so I'm going to go to different cities in Morocco. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to go to Madrid, so that's done.
That's great. That's a lot of new things that you're doing.
That's a lot of new things that but something new I want to try, because I feel like that's a cop-out, because now I already know that I'm going to do that, so another thing was, I wanted to go on a hot air balloon, which I'm also going to do in Morocco. What? So, yeah, I'm so excited. But aside from that, I guess something new that I want to try to not be so hard on myself. I think it's easy to go through transitions and to go through things and to blame yourself and to just like, it's a constant, like, you're stabbing yourself. You're like, oh, and like, I've realized that everything in my life recently I had this realization that I was like, oh my God, I've become really jaded. And I don't want to be jaded. Like, that's not who I am. Like, nobody, like, obviously people who know me don't think of me that way, but like my own brain does, and like, I just don't want to be so hard on myself. Like, I want to be able to forgive myself. And actually, I was talking to my best friend about New Year's resolutions, and she's great. Her name is Yevi, and she's going to be on the show at some point. Mm-hmm. But she said, I don't want to hear New Year's resolution. I want to hear words. Like, what's a word you want to strive for? Mm-hmm. And I think the 2 words, there were 3, but right now I can only think of the 2, was accept and forgive. Mm. So I want to be able to, something new I want to try is accept the changes that are going on around me. Yeah. Preach, do what I preach, because that's what this whole podcast is about, and actually, like, really go for it, It's hard to do. And even though that's what I'm not going to lie, it's hard for me too, even though I say we should do this on the podcast. Like, it's difficult, and I want to be able to accept the changes around me, embrace what's going on, and I want to forgive myself for the things that I have no control over, like, I want to be able to try to do that and be gentle with my decisions, because I know that I am going to make mistakes, and I'm still continuing to make mistakes. And
we all are.
People are going to listen to this, and they're going to be like, girl, what are you doing? But yeah, just like accept what's happening around me, and forgive myself for the mistakes that I continue to do and that I do, and that knowing that that's like a learning process. So that's something that I want to try, not be so hard on myself.
Wonderful. Well, with that, I think we're going to wrap up our bonus episode of the We're So Young podcast. When I introed you today, I called you an actor and a globe traveler and a creator, but talking to you, you're not just a survivor, you're a thriver. I mean, from birth, you coming out, you were surviving, and you've done that throughout your life, and that's really inspirational. And I'm really happy to be here across from you.
Thanks, Troy.
Thank you. And so that's a wrap, youngins.
Yay! Oh, I gotta pee.
Go.
Thanks again for listening to the We're So Young podcast. Like what you've been hearing? Help spread the word. If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Rate, review, and tell your friends about We're So Young. And don't forget to follow us on our socials, at We're So Young Podcast on Instagram, at We're So Young Pod on Twitter, and We're So Young Podcast on Facebook. Let's all get inspired to try new things together. That's it for now. Tune in on the 1st and the 15th of each month for new episodes. Until then, step out of your comfort zones and try new things, because we're so young.